ya estamos en la última recta de la discusión.
Well, 3 very interesting presentations. Would anyone like to make a comment or ask a question?
Estamos aquí y después.
I think there's a question or a comment over there. Thank you. Good afternoon. This is for Vanessa. I wanted to know, well, I've seen that your organization is promoting visibility of the whole matter of the high price of medicines, but what's happening in the world among persons affected by who are HIV positive for this medicine? Thank you very much. Yes, certainly we're seeing responses that are very different among the different actors at global level. One of the strategies adopted is to promote licenses that are mandatory. Governments are making them mandatory, and in the case we've heard about patents in several countries that are developing countries, India, China as well, in Europe also. In fact, Médecins du Monde came out with the first patent a few years ago in the European Office of Patents, and now, just 4 months ago, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there were 30 organizations in this occasion that registered a second patent with the justification that patent science, it wasn't new. So this has not been resolved yet. This type of resolution, what it can involve generics, but Francois and I were talking earlier about the mandatory licenses. Several entities are promoting these in different countries, and the matter is a solution such as this, which is part of the tools available to countries, can be useful for incrementing negotiation capabilities for the countries. But in effective terms, at short term, it's not very effective because, as I said earlier, there are other barriers or obstacles that have to do with exclusivity of data. These are measures that extend somehow the issue to patent exclusivity or patent exclusivity, and if you want to bring out a generic drug, you would have to do all the clinical trials, and there's protection of clinical data for 10 years more or less. In the end, however, we're seeing how to do this, and mainly that's where things are, where the solutions are at this point. In Spain, we've seen the powerful voice of patients, in other countries also, but there's a lot to do still because there are 190 million patients, possible patients, with hepatitis C in the world, and the current prices, even though there are countries with lower prices, it's still impossible to get universal access. And we've got to continue fighting to drive down the price. Julia? Thank you very much. I also would like to congratulate the 3 of you for your excellent presentations, and Michael for moderating this panel. We're all tired now, I know, but I have a question for Vanessa and for Francois about the follow-up that you have made with Truvada. The question, logically, is very wide. You're talking about drugs against hepatitis C, but since we're talking a lot about PrEP these days because of the obvious opportunity, what follow-up have you made and what actions have you planned to take if there's a unfavorable decision, or if it's for the community, the scientific community, and for those infected?
Yes, thanks for your question. Actually, we were not directly, as Médecins du Monde, part of the advocacy for access to PrEP in France, but we've actually followed a little because, of course, we work on access to medicines. When I was listening to you previously, I was telling myself that we will face a very weird situation, which is the reverse that the situation that prevailed 15 years ago, 20 years ago, where the medicines were in the north and the people were in the south. Maybe some southern countries, poor countries, will have access to PrEP before some European countries, which is actually really weird because of the availability of some generic drugs in this country and not in, for example, Spain or France. The second reflection is that, and actually this is directly due to what has been done 15 years ago in order to provide access to people living with HIV and AIDS. And the second aspect is that actually the main barrier, the main obstacle for accessing PrEP in Spain, from what I know, and in the UK, from what I know, is the price. Actually, there is no other reason that justifies now that people don't have access. So either the government has legal tools in order to negotiate or to break the patents, or I'm not that used to the Spanish system, but still, or the pharma industry, Gilead, is more or less free to actually determine the price. At that time, what is specifically a shame for me is that now we actually have access to a new formulation of tenofovir, which is TAF, as you know. But this is really interesting to note that this drug is released the same year than where the patent of the TDF goes at the end. So this is purely a marketing strategy. So in front of that, I don't know what other choice. We have to denounce the Gilead's attitude because now we will face another 20 years period of time with this protection without any justification, because we all know now here in that room and elsewhere that Gilead earned, of course, a lot of money on tenofovir, which is actually good, but now it's done, you know. Now we just need this treatment now. So in France we have that, so we are happy, but we look around us and we see that there is no justification for that.
We were not in the first line of using PrEP, but we have followed the debate, and we hope that it is favorably resolved. Perhaps we wouldn't be talking so much about PrEP or yes or PrEP no if it weren't what it were. It's important, and it's there, and we'll see if in the short term we can work more on this. Thank you. And a last question for Ferran. Do you think, Ferran, that it's just a matter of pricing in Spain for PrEP, or is there another element another factor that is impeding implementation. Obviously, I think price is an obstacle, but it doesn't justify that we don't have PrEP in Spain. Firstly, because we are one of the countries with the highest rates of infection and the lowest response. And other countries have done what we're being asked to do, and they did it much more than earlier, and not as thoroughly. There was a study in Belgium, in Holland, long ago, and here we just were ignoring the situation, and the community has not been, and Diego said this too, it has not risen to the occasion as it should have. It's everything that we, after 35 years of epidemic in our own little convents, have done what we could with our payrolls, with our projects, but there has really been no one in politics able to explain why this has not been implemented. And what happened in France is admirable. I think Marie-Sautin woke up very happy, announcing free access for everyone to PrEPs after a job that was very well done and well coordinated among all in France, despite the polemic that still continues about the capacity of unity. And we're light years away from that. And then the ministry, we must ask ourselves where the regional autonomous governments are on this. They've got to implement it and finance it if the government and the ministry approves it. And we haven't had any interterritorial meetings about this, and many communities are saying they don't agree with the study, but they're not interested really, and they don't have pressure put upon them by society. So civil society and the scientific community must not stop. We're talking about something we can't wait until the generic comes around. We've got 10 infections daily, and many of these could be avoided. I'm going off on a tangent a little bit, but topics are pre-selected. People who are decided to do PrEP really want to, they're very eager and convinced about it. We see this in Europe, and we see this in the U.S. And I could finish with something a little rude, but I have to say, I think it's indecent what's happening here in this country. Now we have our last question. This is for Vanessa. I would like to understand when the prices for Truvada were set, was that really what it cost them to manufacture it, etc., etc.? There have always been many, well, the famous Propecia against baldness, that cost 40 euros a month, but the same active principle only cost 18 euros. So why do we allow these things? No, well, the prices, this price there is the price that would be paid in Spain for purchase, or in Argentina. It's not the cost of the research and the development cost. The matter is, we don't know the cost, the real cost that correspond to research and development of any of these drugs. As I mentioned, there are some recent studies For example, Sucreville that talk about 100, 200 euros, or Novia for cancer, 100 pounds. And is this can this be extrapolated to HIV? I don't know. This is something we don't know. It's something that we're trying to determine and get transparency in these costs, because ever increasingly we hear voices from experts who speak about changing the way that prices are set, and we need to go perhaps more to models using real prices. So that's complicated because we have to believe the industry and what they're telling us, but we will have to look for formula that will allow us to get near the real cost. Francois?
Transparency, yes. Transparency is definitely a core issue. What I would like to add is that with regard to pharmaceutical industry, there is what we called the willingness to pay, which is actually a very important notion for the pharmaceutical industry to define at what level they will determine the price in each country. So it relies on the willingness to pay of the country where the drug will be introduced. So for example, with the new HCV drugs that was the object of the scandal, Sofosbuvir, when the drug was introduced in France, approximately of 56,000 euros for a cure at the very beginning. Now it's 21, I think. In the same time, it was introduced in Egypt approximately at 1,000 or 2,000 euros. So it really, I mean, the pharmas define price also with relation to what a country can pay. So for example, France is always high because we are known as a country that want to pay for access to drugs without a limit, whereas in the UK, for example, there is a clear limit, an indicator, very complex, to define what the society wants to pay for a medical device, a drug, etc., etc.
Can we have the last word over there? Yes? Yes, for the translation it will be easier.
If people are interested in knowing about the pricing and the structure and what cost it is, I suggest you watch Andrew Hill's presentation from Glasgow HIV conference last year. He broke all hepatitis drugs and HIV drugs down to research and development, cost and profit.
Okay, we are at the end of today's meeting. I think we started with the principles of Denver, very important principles. We have seen some really great initiatives from the community. The response to ChemSex from David, the response to PrEP from Diego, the testing initiatives from Barcelona, Ferran, the initiatives about access to price from Vanessa and Francois from the International Vision of Initiative. So I think we really see from the community there's a will to respond to the crisis, to the epidemic, and we should really look ways to get politicians on our side, because we know that's one of the biggest challenges we have. So I want to thank everybody for the contribution, Julia also for the moderation this morning. Just to tell you that tomorrow morning there will be again a couple of sessions. They start at 9:30, and the last session in the afternoon will finish. We started with the principle of Denver, and they will finish with the principles of Madrid. So thank you very much for your attention, everybody, and see you tomorrow. Thank you.